Hello, everyone. My name is Phyllis Everett, and I'm from Saffron Trust Women's Foundation. And today we're going to be bringing you a really good topic when it comes to therapy. And I'm going to be introducing you to Dr. Ebony. And as you can see on the table, we have her My Therapy cards, which are very important. And so I'm going to pass it over to Dr. Ebony so she can do an introduction, and then we'll have a couple of questions and talk a little bit more about this topic when it comes to therapy and women of color. Dr. Ebony, please introduce yourself.
Absolutely. So I'm Dr. Ebony. I'm a licensed psychologist here in Austin, and I'm also a food relationship strategist. So I work with women around trauma and kind of getting their voice back, learning how to communicate, ask for what they want and need. I also am helping women learn how to recover from diet culture, learning how to kind of move away from the oppression that is diet culture, and learning how to get courage and power around food again. And I also created my therapy cards, which we can talk about.
Yes, these therapy cards are really, really good, and we're going to touch base on those throughout the conversation today. And Dr. Ebony, I just want to say thank you for doing this kind of work. There are so many women in our community who this is going to benefit. When I first heard about it, my daughter called me and said, "Mom, did you hear about Dr. Ebony and the My Therapy cards?" And I said no. And once I went online and I took a look, I mean, I was just in awe of the kind of work that you do. And when I got the therapy cards, I think I received mine about 2 months ago. I mean, I was going through the deck like you wouldn't believe. And so many questions that really posed an opening for me to go a little bit deeper in my life. And so I'm glad that you're here with us. I'm glad that AFTV5 has allowed us to do this interview. I think it's going to be tremendous to the people in our community, especially the women of Austin who Saffron Trust represents. So I'm really excited about that. I have a couple of questions that I'm going to ask you today, and if you can give us some answers. I think I posed about 6 questions. I think the audience is really going to appreciate these questions. I think it's going to allow us to take a deeper dive into what these therapy cards really, really open up for women of color. So if you don't mind, I'm going to begin with our first question
Let's
today.
go. Yeah.
Okay, let's go. Dr. Ebony, why is it important for Black women to take care of their mental health?
Yes, so I love this question. I think we have to take care of our mental health because I truly believe that Black women
Yes.
are the center of a lot of the strength that we have in our communities. So when we are not together, then our communities are not together. When we aren't together, then our legacies aren't together. So we have to take care of ourselves. And I like to bring in the historical framework. Historically, Black women have been left out of the conversation around self-care. Black women have not been given permission to take care of themselves, but told to take care of everybody else. And kind of the standard has been that you would take care of everybody else and that you would often neglect yourself.
Yeah.
So I think that along with that, we have gotten to the point now where we kind of neglect our physical health, our mental health, our emotional health. And one of the things, though, that we are taking care of a lot of times is our spirituality and our faith, but we're not taking care of our mental health, which then impacts so many other areas of our lives. It impacts the way that we kind of view the world. And so if our mental health is not okay, then we're viewing the world from a very skewed perspective. And so, especially if you take somebody, so my expertise is trauma.
Oh, okay.
If you take a woman who has experienced trauma and she hasn't done that work to resolve that trauma, guess how she's going to view the world? Through a trauma lens. Guess what she's going to pass down to her legacy? Trauma-filled perspectives, trauma-filled ideals, that kind of thing. So it's important that we do our work so that then we can pass that on and make space for other people coming behind us to do that work as well.
Oh, that's really good. And I love when you talk about taking care of your spirituality, but not only other things that come along in your life. And that's like really, really important. And I think these cards touch on that and takes us to another level. So I really like that you explained that to the audience. My next question, Dr. Ebony, is what do you think is in the way of Black women taking care of their mental health?
Yeah, this is probably one of my favorite questions.
Oh, yeah.
So I think I like to go back historically, right? I don't think that historically in this country, systemically, we haven't been given an opportunity to take care of ourselves. We lack resources. If you think about where we're populated, we haven't received the best of resources to understand what it's like to take care of ourselves. And then the mental health field in and of itself. So we go back, the field of psychology has been created out of the medical model, which is white men theorizing what is best for Black women. Also, white males, white doctors experimenting on Black bodies. So if you think about the field of psychology and mental health being born out of that area or that expertise, that philosophy, then of course you have a field that then pathologizes Black people. And so when you talk about what gets in the way, it's not just us, it's systemically things have kind of gotten in the way. So we have been afraid to enter these spaces because these spaces have served to treat us as experiments, have served to pathologize us way more than other populations are pathologized,
Wow.
and sort of put those labels on us that something is wrong with us. And so who wants to engage with the field who continuously does that? We're coming around now, but we still have a long ways to go. But I do think that things that get in the way are just a lack of resources, us not understanding the historical context, us being able to protect ourselves or wanting to protect ourselves and our families, and saying, well, we don't want to put this out in the public because if we do, guess what's going to happen to us? Children are going to be taken away. These are some real fears that people have. Families are going to be broken apart. People are going to be thrown in jail. So we have gotten this over time, just this protective nature of not telling our business to people. But we know that that has served to also come at our detriment. And so we have to get comfortable and trusting of the system again. But we can't get trusting of the system if we don't have a system that is allowing itself to be trusted. So that's part of the work that I do as a Black psychologist, is having these very real conversations around, yes, I'm a person in this field, but we've also got to do our parts as providers to help people feel like they can come to us and feel safe. I actually just got a message yesterday from somebody who said, if my daughter talks to you, will she be committed? And I was like, these are some of the questions that people really have. And so we've got to begin to create space for people to want to engage with us. So when you talk about barriers and things that get in the way, there's trust. Things that get in the way, there's cost. So now once people feel trusting, can they pay for it? And if they can pay for it, can they find somebody? And if they can find somebody, can they trust people can they trust themselves to tell people? So you have a lot of these things that serve as barriers, which is why I created the cards, to kind of combat cost, access, and stigma, because these are things that largely kind of keep us out of the therapy room.
Wow, that is so true. I remember I was a single mom raising 3 children, and so I know about the secret keeping, and I know about how frightening it is to really move forward and open up your life to people that can really help you, and what are they really going to do. And I remember when I was raising my kids, and I did let someone in, it became a plethora of events that really never helped my children or I. So I do understand the stigma and the trust and opening your doors to people. So it's really good that you touched on that, and those are the areas that people are really afraid, that really stops us from moving forward as women of color, and especially single women. You know, when we have children, who's gonna take our kids if I tell them what's going on? You know, what happens if it's something deeper that I'm not able to see? How am I going to be able to deal with it as a parent emotionally? And so I haven't been, so as parents, we're afraid to talk about our trauma, and then we stop our children from opening the door to talk about their trauma and exposing it. So yeah, that's just such a good point that you brought up. My next question is, how does trauma impact our lives, and how does it impact our relationships?
Absolutely. So I like to define trauma for people
please
so that
do.
we're all on the same page.
Yeah.
So trauma is anything that significantly disrupts your psyche or your functioning. Okay? So you would hear sometimes trauma was kind of related to war. Trauma was related to fighting, combat. Trauma was only related to veterans. But as we evolve as a field of mental health, we know that that's not the case. Anybody can experience trauma. I think as a field of mental health, we've done a poor job of actually kind of talking about trauma in a way that applies to Black people specifically, because being a Black person in this country is traumatizing in and of itself. So we actually are coming around to that, right? And I see more people talking about that and having that conversation this year. But historically, we have been traumatized, but trauma has only, if you think about PTSD, it's only been related to people who are veterans or people in the military. Even before that, we had the name of shell shock. Even before that, we had the name of battle fatigue. What happened to all those people, our ancestors who were slaves, who were beaten, who saw people killed? So those things didn't apply to us, so we weren't given permission to feel traumatized. Those things were minimized, those things were shut off, those things were not actually something that we could label as our experience. So when we're talking about trauma, we're talking about all those things that has disrupted our psyche or our functioning. When we experience trauma, that filters we're beginning to see the world through that filter. And so we're talking about relationships, talk about your children. If you see the world through a trauma-filled lens, then you're gonna be in survival mode. That's fight, flight, or freeze mode. And so everything that you do in the world, if you haven't resolved that, is gonna be out of fight, flight, or freeze mode. So you're gonna always be protective. Oh, my child can't be here, my child can't be there, my child can't do this, my child can't do that, or I can't do this, I have to be with them all the time because somebody's gonna hurt them. So you're always thinking protection, survival. So you pass that anxiety, you pass that fear on that lives in your body and that is carried on throughout DNA, all of these things, right? You talk about relationships. If you're in survival mode in relationships, what are you doing? A fear of abandonment can come up.
Yes, all the time.
Fear of kind of being betrayed, fear of rejection. So like this never feeling safe in relationships, never feeling like you're safe, never feeling like your children are safe. So if this is the way that you're going about the world, then you really never feel grounded. You're always in this I always kind of talk about it in terms of being like an emergency room. You're in the ER all the time. And what do we know about people who are in the ER all the time? Nurses, doctors, they're kind of just frazzled all the time. They're on the go. So we're operating like that in our lives, and we are never grounded. We are not allowing ourselves to kind of take a break, and we're causing more health issues for ourselves. So you have kind of backup of cortisol, you're not eating well, you're not sleeping well, things, you're kind of holding tension in your body and your muscles, and you're kind of, when you're in a survival state of thinking, your emotions aren't really grounded, and so you're experiencing intense emotions all the time. And so if you're thinking about somebody who's experiencing those emotions all the time in relationships, that doesn't really help build a really healthy relationship, a really solid foundation.
Wow, that's really good. I know I had trauma in my life, and I'm 61 right now, but I could say that half of my life I was carrying that trauma, not knowing that it was driving from that. And so many things happen. I think I was speaking to you the other day, and I think that one of the things I was speaking to you about a photo that I had seen when I was a younger girl, when I was 16, and immediately I had all these emotions that came to me. And you told me, and I said, Dr. Ebony, why is this happening to me? I've done all of this work. I have no trauma in my life. And you said, the body keeps count?
The body keeps score.
The body keeps score. I was like, whoo. Yeah, because it was like that picture of myself when I was looking at myself when I was 15, had injected itself inside my spirit, and I was carrying it all over again. But I was able to departmentalize it because of the work that I have done, and actually speaking to you. So when you talk about trauma, that was so clear, and that was such a perfect example. Yeah. So thank you for that. Okay, my next question is to Dr. Ebony. Why is it important to work on mindset, habits, and triggers? And that was a trigger that happened to me when my body was keeping score.
I was going to tell you that. I was going to say that. I was going to say you were triggered, right?
I was triggered.
So I think the audience may agree that sometimes we can be kind of in our lives and we can kind of feel like nothing is really happening, nothing is really going on. We feel like we're going about the day. Like let's take COVID for instance, right? All of us are like, we're fine, we're good, I'm at my house, I'm working. We're all kind of sitting in the middle of a trauma. We're sitting in the middle of a pandemic. This is a crisis that we're all trying to navigate, right? So I think what happens with trauma is that we feel like we're not immediately kind of frazzled, if we're not really upset, and we think we're not kind of experiencing a trauma.
Oh, yeah.
What's happening is that thing has been kind of laid to rest a little bit in the back, but it's not gone. It's not gone, and at any moment, anything can trigger that. So smells are triggers.
Ooh. Don't let me smell some fried catfish.
Oh, yeah. Places.
It takes me all the way back to when I was 10.
Yeah, like catfish. So one of the things that our memories kind of latches on to the most is olfactory. So our sense of smell. So you can be somewhere in your 40s and think about that smell that you smelled when you were in second grade. Like I remember what the cafeteria smelled like, and then immediately that bully comes to mind, or when you got in trouble. So a lot of things are interconnected. And the reasons that we need to pay attention to these three areas is I believe that these are the areas that kind of keep us from growing. These are the areas that keep us from elevating. So mindset, right? Everything that we do flows from how we think, from our perspective. And so if our mindset is off, if we're thinking about things from a skewed perspective or a negative perspective, that's going to filter everything that we see, right? So habits, those things that we're doing behaviorally. So not only are we thinking, how are we behaving? And so when I think about working through habits, we're working through those things that once helped us to survive, but are no longer working for us. So a lot of us gained habits that got us out of a bad situation, but some of us haven't let those habits go. Some of us still hold those habits around and they're no longer working for us. So we need to figure out how to replace those with more effective habits. And then triggers is what happens when life happens to you. What are your coping skills? How are you actually dealing with those triggers? What things do you have in your toolbox to actually help you work through kind of that being thrown off or being reminded? We call those memories or flashbacks that you have. What do you actually have available to you to help you work through that? In those three areas, if we get really good at building ourselves up in those three areas, then we get really good at actually resolving a lot of things that are there. So some of the cards actually talk about forgiveness or kind of letting yourself off the hook for things. Like, what do you want to tell your younger self? What do you wish your future self kind of knew? What do you think your younger self knew? What do you want to tell your future self? So digging deeper into a lot of these areas to help get you some resolution. And it's not that when we're healed, it's not that these things go away.
No, right.
is that we know how to better respond to them when they come up.
Oh,
And I think a lot of people, kind of the audience probably knows, we think that when we're healed, we're like, oh, we're not going to ever experience that again. That's not what that means. It means that when it happens to me again or when that comes up, I'm going to better know how to respond to it. That's what healing is about. It's not about never experiencing anything horrible or upsetting again. And so if we do our work in these 3 areas, we can be better equipped.
Oh, that is so good, Dr. Ebony. Which brings me to my next question, because we're talking about trauma, we're talking about triggers, we're talking about habits, we're talking about emotional stuff. How do these My Therapy cards help all of those areas? I happen to know that because I took out one of the cards. I was having lunch with one of my girlfriends, and we just did one of the cards on forgiveness, and she began to cry at the table. So share with the audience why these My Therapy cards will go deeper into those triggers, those forgiveness areas, and all those topics that we talked about today, and why it's so important.
Yeah, so I want to make sure that I circle back around and tell people why these cards were created. So these cards, I felt like when I started private practice, I kind of felt like cost was an issue. I don't accept insurance, so I know a lot of people can't get in. I also can't only see certain people, and if anybody knows anything about laws and our license kind of boundaries, we can only practice with people who are in state for which we hold the license.
Okay.
And then stigma, so people don't want to go in and they don't want anybody to know. So I created these cards to combat cost, so they're way cheaper than a therapy session would be, and to create access. So I wanted people to really feel like they were talking to Dr. Ebony. I know that sounds crazy, but I was like, well, people can't come see me. I want them to feel like they're talking.
Well, I certainly did. I want to interrupt you because when I was having lunch with my girlfriend and we did it, I felt like Dr. Ebony was right there.
Yeah, so that's what I wanted. So I wanted access, right? I wanted people to have access to quality care.
Yes.
And I wanted people to have access to quality questions. I know there's a lot of affirmation things out there. There's a lot of self-care things out there, but I wanted us to have permission to go deeper. And so these are questions that I actually ask my clients. And so I created 36 cards of content that actually gets at those areas. So I tell people, if you take a card a week, then you have 36 weeks worth of work. And that's one therapy session a week. Even though the cards don't substitute therapy, you could do deeper level work once a week for 36 weeks. And so that's work that you can do all year. And so when you look at these cards, we're assessing mindset. We're actually going deeper into mindset. So it's 12 cards geared towards helping you build up on your mindset skills. And so you have questions like, what are the things that I think about myself? What are the things that are holding me back? What are the things that I trust or areas where I don't have trust in myself? And then so the habit cards may be like, what am I doing that I keep doing that I know is not working for me anymore? Why am I continuing to do that? There's a card in there that says, what makes it difficult for me to say no to others? So if you know anybody who have extensive histories of trauma, sometimes there's this core belief that I'm not good enough. And so there's this overcompensation in relationships to try to be good enough for people. And so you may say yes, yes, yes to things and overstep your own boundaries. So there's cards in there that get at that. Like how do you need to create your boundaries? What do you need to do? And then the trigger cards help you to realize, okay, when things come up for me, what are the coping skills I need to build? What are those things I need to do? So ask questions like, what emotions are difficult for you to sit with? And all of this is geared towards us gaining a deeper level of awareness. Okay. If I know that frustration is difficult for me to deal with and frustration leads me to act out in ways that hurt myself or others, then I know that's an emotion I need to do something about. If every time I get frustrated, I need to build a skill around, okay, what can I do differently when I'm frustrated? So that way, I'm not continuing to damage relationships. I'm not continuing to self-sabotage, those kinds of things. So the more aware I become of myself, the better I can show up for the people around me and the people I'm in relationship with.
Oh, that's good, Dr. Ebony. That is so true. That's really good. And I'm going to wrap it up here with my last question. Where do people start today on working with these cards? So where would they start if they got the deck of cards? What would be the starting point for them?
Yeah, so this deck was actually created for people to use alone. It was created for you to use with your therapist. If you have a therapist, it was actually created for therapists to use with their clients. So there's no right or wrong way to do it. But I do tell people some common practices or rules of thumb is start where is most easy. First, when you get the deck, read through the cards. Read through the cards, figure out and set aside which cards are going to be I put it in like a street light example, red, yellow, and green. Put the green cards over here. Those are the cards that are going to be your lowest hanging fruit. Those are going to be the cards that are going to be easier to work through. Our yellow cards are going to be the things that kind of give us a slight pause that we kind of need to think about. Those red cards are going to be those things that kind of take our breath away. Like, what do I need to forgive myself for? Ooh, let me come back to this. Work through the green cards first.
Yes.
Work your way up to the yellow cards,
Okay.
then the red cards. Because what happens is, if we give ourselves an opportunity to see a win, or ourselves an opportunity to see ourselves succeed, it motivates us and creates the opportunity for us to keep going.
Okay.
If we start with the red card, we're going to feel defeated. We're going to feel like a failure. We're going to feel intimidated by the deck. The deck is not created for intimidation. It's created for you to begin to gain self-awareness. So allow yourself to start with cards that feel easier to tackle. Those wins are going to build on each other, and you're going to have more likelihood of working through the day. So that's why I say parse them out in terms of go cards, a little bit of caution, this gives me pause, and we're going to start with the ones that are going to give me some easy wins.
Wow. Well, I'm sure the audience is just loving this. I mean, this is just such a gift to our community. We've been looking for something like this for God knows how long. I know I have, and when my daughter called me to tell me about these cards, I just knew I had to find out who you were. And I'm so glad we've had the opportunity to talk to each other over the last couple of months. And I was so glad to get my deck and sit with my friends and do some of the work. And I really especially appreciate the moment that we had last week when I had the trauma that I didn't realize was a trauma. And the body keeps score, the body keeps count, and that was just so deep. And so we're really excited about this. I'm really grateful that you have decided to partner with Saffron Trust Women's Foundation, and I'm looking forward to doing more work with you. I know that you and I have talked about having a series of workshops towards the end of the year, and so we'll be posting that on your site. Please give the audience your site, Dr. Ebony, so they could follow you and get a lot of your information.
Yeah, absolutely. So my website is drebony.com, and you can follow me across social media, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Dr. Ebony Online.
Yeah, and she has some really good stuff, because I've gone through all of your stuff, and she has a couple of sessions there that just really tickle me, and are really some good work that you're doing with people and good information. And I'm also on saffrontrust.org. You can follow me, Phyllis Everett, saffrontrust.org. We have a website. Instagram is saffrontrust1, and so is Facebook. And we look forward to bringing women leaders from the community to do the series of workshops that we're going to be talking about, which is going to consist, we're looking to have maybe like 3 or 4 sessions. And so we're looking for some key leaders. Dr. Ebony has relationships in Austin, and so do I. So we're going to be looking out to some of those key women leaders in our community to join us to do the work so that we can make an impact in our community, in ourselves first, and working with the women that we bring into our circles. So thanks again. Thanks to AFTV5 for having us here today. They've been really good in sponsoring Saffron Trust to do a lot of the work that we're doing in the community. So kudos to AFTV5. We couldn't have done this without you, and we thank our audience today. Bye-bye.